He watched his father throw the letters away and said nothing. All his life, he'd been taught that silence was respect. But one day he realized silence had stolen more from him than time ever could. I was never good at throwing things away, not because I'm sentimental, not because I think every note or photograph carries some deep eternal meaning, but because some things, they don't belong to you alone. They carry someone else's breath, their handwriting, their final decision not to explain themselves. And who am I to erase that? He said it like he was brushing crumbs off the table. Come on, why would he need that? He's just a kid. And just like that, the letters were gone. His father, my son-in-law, didn't even pause, picked up the bundle, yellowed and trembling, and dropped it in the trash like receipts from an old store. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him what those letters were. I didn't say that some men never learned how to speak in person, but still found a way to bleed into the page. I didn't explain that the ink wasn't just ink. It was a man trying to leave something behind without making a scene. You learn, after enough years, that if someone doesn't want to understand, they won't. Not now, not later. So I waited until the house was quiet, walked over to the bin, reached through coffee grounds and packaging, and took them back. Not because I thought the boy would read them, not even because I thought he'd care, but because I knew one day the silence would get to him. And when it did, when the applause dies down and the phone stops ringing and no one needs him for a speech or a favor, he would look for the one thing no one can buy, meaning. And then, maybe, he'd find it in something small enough to fit in a pocket: the compass, the letter, the watch, the book, the prayer book, and the medal. 6 things, that's all. I kept them in a plain folder, never told him they were his, but I also never let them go. Not because I'm noble, not because I believe in destiny, because I've seen too many people forget who they came from. And even worse, I've seen what happens when they don't even know they're forgetting. I taught history for 42 years, not the kind they test you on, the kind people try to leave out. The mistakes, the fear, the missed chances, the conversations people were too proud or too scared to have. You want to know what ruins people? It's not pain. It's not failure. It's silence. The things you weren't allowed to say, the apologies no one gave, the objects someone decided you didn't deserve to keep. My grandson didn't ask for those 6 items, but I watched the way he touched the table after his father threw the letters away, like he was trying to remember something he hadn't learned yet. That's how memory works. You don't always get the story first. Sometimes you feel the loss before you know what was taken. So I packed them, the 6 things, and kept them near. Quietly. No speeches, no ceremonies. Just like my father once packed away a rusted spoon from his own father's camp. Never told me about it until his last week. I remember asking, "Why this?" He said, "Because it's the only thing I held when I was still his son." Don't underestimate what a child notices. You think they're distracted. You think they don't care. But they see what you don't say. They hear the gaps between your sentences, and when they grow up, they'll repeat the things you thought they forgot. Years passed. My grandson rose faster than anyone expected. He had that kind of presence people respect before they even understand why. And the night he stood on that stage, the youngest mayor this town ever had, he didn't quote statistics. He didn't list accomplishments. He named 6 things, and in that moment, he became the man all of them had tried to shape, even the ones who failed him. Let me tell you something simple. The most dangerous sentence in a family is, "He won't understand." Because once you say that, you start deciding what someone else is allowed to remember. That's how heritage dies. Not from burning, from dismissing. And what survives? Only what someone decided was worth saving, even when no one else cared. You think this story is about a boy. It's not. It's about everyone who almost lost the right to know who they were, because someone older, someone louder, someone more practical said, "Why would they need that?" I have no patience left for that voice, the one that trims history down to what fits in a drawer. That voice has taken too much from too many. But I'll stop here, because what I'm going to say next, it's heavier, and not everyone will want to hear it. This is just the beginning. The next part is the most painful one, but it's also the one that will change you. They don't burn books anymore. They bury them under silence. They erase people with phrases like, "It's better not to talk about that," or "She's too young to understand," or "What's the point in digging up the past?" That's how it always starts. Not with cruelty, with convenience. I remember watching my daughter the night her husband threw the letters away. She didn't stop him. She didn't argue. She just looked away. Not because she agreed, but because she was tired. You'd be shocked how many things women allow, not out of weakness, but exhaustion. I've seen it too many times. One man speaks louder, another man disappears. One decision, and someone else's history ends up in the trash, not lost, removed, and the most dangerous part? They do it thinking they're protecting you. They say things like, "Let them be a child," but what they really mean is, "Let them stay ignorant," because the moment someone knows who they are, they become harder to control. No one likes that part of the story. The part where a boy starts asking questions, real ones, not about grades or hobbies or chores, but the kind that make people shift in their chairs. What was my grandfather like? Why did no one talk about him? Why did you keep his name but nothing else? That's when the silence begins to sweat. So they change the subject. Offer candy. Tell you to go play. Push a screen into your hands and hope the questions dissolve. But they don't. They ferment. And years later, when the boy has a voice, louder, clearer, more public, they'll call him ungrateful for remembering what they wanted erased. I'll tell you something I've never said aloud. The compass wasn't his grandfather's, it was mine. I found it in a drawer in '64, still ticking, still pointing north. No name, no story attached. Just a strange metal weight I couldn't throw away. Years later, my father told me it belonged to his brother. He whispered it like a crime. "Don't tell your mother," he said. "She won't like the reminder." I was 29. That was the first time I heard I even had an uncle. You want to know why I kept that compass? Because it was the first thing that made me question the version of my family I'd been given. Not because I needed answers, but because I realized I'd been living inside a story someone else edited, and I didn't sign off on the final draft. That's what you need to understand. People don't just hide facts. They hide entire selves. And every time they decide something isn't appropriate to pass down, they're not protecting you. They're keeping you small. I kept that compass for 60 years, passed it to my grandson like a secret, and I watched his eyes when I did. He didn't ask, "What is this?" He asked, "Why do I feel like I've seen this before?" Because memory isn't always linear. Sometimes it's passed through tone, through a father's silence at the dinner table, through the way someone refuses to answer a question, then walks out of the room, That's why I kept all 6 items, not because they're sacred, because they were denied. The letter, the watch, the medal, the book, the prayer book, the compass. Each of them was almost lost, not by accident, but by choice. Someone decided the child didn't need it, didn't deserve it, wouldn't understand it. But children grow, and the worst thing you can do is raise someone in a vacuum, then resent them for not having roots. My grandson was raised in a house with perfect walls, clean surfaces, polite conversation, and a massive hole right in the center where a name used to be. He didn't know it, but his hunger for meaning was inherited. It came from every story his father never asked, every box that was thrown out before he could open it. That's why he started collecting objects, strange things, old books, broken pens, coins from other countries, not because he liked clutter, because he was searching for something that felt kept. People think the opposite of memory is forgetting. It's not. It's being denied the chance to remember. His father thought he was protecting him from sadness. But sadness isn't what breaks you. It's the feeling that everyone around you agreed to a silence you never signed up for, and no one warned you. I've lived long enough to see what happens to people who were raised inside that kind of silence. They become suspicious of their own instincts. They question their worth. They apologize for things they didn't break. They say, "Maybe I'm just too sensitive," when what they mean is, "No one ever told me the truth." So I started giving it to him, piece by piece, not all at once, not with drama, just presence. Here, this belonged to someone who loved you before you were born. Here, this was held by a man who never learned to say the words, so he left this behind instead. Here, this doesn't come with instructions. It's not supposed to. And over time, I watched him change, not into someone better, into someone real. Because what they never tell you is, you don't become yourself by achieving things. You become yourself by reclaiming what they tried to discard. Some people inherit houses, others inherit silence. But the ones who survive, they learn how to hear what was never said and speak it out loud. That's what my grandson did the night he stood on that stage. He didn't read a speech. He returned a legacy. 6 things, no explanation, just names. And in doing that, he broke a pattern so old, most of us thought it was tradition. There's nothing noble about keeping your mouth shut. There's nothing strong about throwing away what you don't understand. And there's no protection in pretending your history doesn't matter. You want to know what real strength looks like? It's reaching into a trash bin, past everyone's judgment, and pulling out the thing no one else thought was worth saving, then holding it up and saying, This is mine. You don't get to decide that for me." I saw him do it, and in that moment I knew. He didn't just become a leader. He became a man no one could shrink. What comes next is the turning point, the truth you've been avoiding. Now comes the moment that either breaks you or frees you. If you have ever been underestimated, ignored, or told, "Why do you need this? You're just a child," then this story is about you too. Leave a comment. What is something you once wanted to keep, but someone else decided for you that it was unimportant? Maybe today is the time to take back what is yours. Subscribe to the channel if you still have that person inside you who once silently picked up a discarded letter from the floor. The person who will one day have to stand on stage and list the 6 things that started it all. There's a quiet type of damage that looks like love. It walks into your life politely, smiles at you from across the table, tells you you're special, then clips your wings before you learn to fly, all in the name of protection. That's how they do it. Not with rage, with comfort. They praise you for being kind, then punish you for having needs. They call you strong, but only when you're silent. They ask for your help, then leave when you're the one bleeding. And somehow, you still believe they care. That's the part no one warns you about, the kind of pain that comes dressed as approval. I know that pain. I lived it. And worse, I passed it on. It took me years to see what I'd done to my own daughter, how I taught her to serve others before she even knew what she wanted, how I trained her to be polite instead of honest, how I clapped for her achievements but never asked how she slept at night. She grew up believing she was loved, and in many ways she was, but not for who she really was, for how well she fit the version of her we needed her to be. I can still hear myself saying it. She's so good, never complains, always helps. As if that was the highest form of success, as if disappearing was something to reward. And she believed it. Of course she did, because we told her that being selfless made her worthy. We never explained that selfless people get emptied, and no one rushes to refill them. Now look, this isn't a confession. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm telling you this because someone needs to say it. Being good will not protect you. Being useful will not guarantee love. Being quiet will not make them stay. I watched my daughter vanish inside a life that looked perfect from the outside. Smart husband, clean house, well-behaved child, and underneath it all, silence. She didn't fight. She adapted. Until the day her own son started asking questions she couldn't answer. And for the first time in years, I saw her hesitate. He asked her why she never talked about her grandfather, why she didn't keep anything from him, why everything in the house felt like it belonged to someone else. And she looked at me, not with anger, not even blame, just that quiet, exhausted kind of disappointment that says, "Why didn't you give me the tools to carry this?" That's what happens when you inherit nothing but survival. You get strong in all the wrong ways. You learn to tolerate instead of live. You master endurance instead of connection. And you wonder why love feels like labor. I gave her no map, only silence, and now she had to decide if she would pass that same map down to her son. That's the moment the chain can break, or tighten. She didn't say anything to me that night. She just went into her room, sat with the letters I had returned to her, and cried in the kind of way that doesn't make sound. I stood in the hallway and let her have that moment alone, because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about whether she would finally allow herself to feel what we had trained her to suppress. And that boy, the one his father dismissed, the one they said was too young to understand, he waited by the door, didn't interrupt, didn't push, just stayed close enough for her to know. You don't have to do this alone anymore. That's how healing starts, not with answers, with presence. But healing has a price. You have to burn the version of yourself they rewarded, the agreeable one, the nice one, the helper, the one who kept secrets to protect the peace. You have to ask the question you were taught never to speak. What if they only loved me because I was easy to carry? That question hurts. It tears through every memory you thought was warm. It exposes the manipulation that wore a friendly face. But once you ask it, you can never unask it. And that's where freedom begins. I saw my daughter wrestle with it, and I didn't step in. Not because I didn't care, because I finally understood. Some battles are sacred. They can't be interrupted. They have to be earned. The next morning, she came into the kitchen, eyes tired, posture changed, and without looking at me, she said, "I want him to know everything." I didn't ask who him was. She wasn't talking to me. She was declaring something to herself. And from that day forward, she stopped shrinking. She started speaking about her father, not just the medals or the good memories, the hard things, the betrayals, the regrets. She let her son hear the whole picture, and in doing that, she gave him what we never gave her, the right to choose who he wanted to be, with his eyes wide open. That's why he became a leader. Not because he was perfect, because he had the truth, the full truth, unfiltered, complicated, real. You can't lead people if you're still trying to earn your family's approval. You can't make peace if you're terrified of making noise. You can't love if you were taught to disappear in the name of it. He stood on that stage and named the 6 items, not to impress, not to honor anyone, but to prove something to himself. I come from somewhere, and no one gets to erase that. There was no applause when he said it, just stillness, the kind that fills a room when everyone hears something they didn't expect, but couldn't ignore. He wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't someone's son. He was his own story now. And I was just an old man in the corner, watching a legacy return to itself. What's coming is the quietest part, but it holds the heaviest truth. The next chapter is not about pain. It's about what's left after it. There's a moment people don't prepare you for. It comes after the climax, after the confrontation, not with noise, but with silence. Nobody warns you that once the truth is spoken, really spoken, there's no applause, no music, no rush of relief. There's just stillness and the reality that you now have to live differently, because you know now, and once you know, you can't go back. I remember watching my grandson after the ceremony. He wasn't proud. He wasn't shaken. He was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from carrying something you finally understand belongs to you, and only you. Not because others gave it, but because you claimed it. That's the part people never talk about. How lonely healing is, how it strips you, how the moment you stop being what others needed you to be, they don't always know what to do with you. And it's not because they're cruel, it's because they built their comfort on your absence. And now you've shown up fully, present, awake, and they're left staring at someone they never really met. I've lived long enough to know this. Not everyone wants you whole. Some only love the broken version of you, the version that apologized for taking up space. And when that version disappears, so does their affection. My grandson learned that the hard way. The same people who celebrated his victory stopped returning his calls when he started asking harder questions. Questions about policy, about ethics, about memory. He thought leadership meant being respected. He didn't expect it to mean being alone. But that's the price. Wholeness costs you the audience that only clapped when you performed pain quietly. And what you're left with is something deeper, not approval, not love, but self-respect. And it doesn't come in a wave. It arrives in small moments, like the morning he found one of the letters his grandfather had written, folded perfectly, unread for decades. No fanfare, no revelation, just a man's words, waiting for someone to care enough not to throw them out. He read it, then sat for over an hour, holding it in his lap, not because it said anything profound, but because it said something simple. I didn't know how to talk to you, but I wanted to try. That was it. A man failed to speak in life, so he wrote, and the letter outlived him. That's the only legacy some of us get, and it's enough. if someone doesn't erase it. That morning, my grandson didn't cry. He didn't post about it. He didn't tell anyone. He just put the letter in his pocket and went to work. And I knew that was the day he became something irreversible, not a symbol, not a hero, a man who chooses memory over myth. People love a clean story. They want heroes and villains, winners and losers. But real life doesn't give you that. It gives you parents who meant well and failed you. It gives you children who grow up too fast because no one explained what they lost. It gives you forgiveness with no apology. And you either make peace with that or you stay bitter. I've made peace, not because I stopped being angry, but because I stopped expecting anything else. There's no justice for what was thrown away. There's no undoing the silence. But there's a different kind of justice, the kind that lives in the fact that the next generation refuses to lie. That's what my grandson became, not the perfect man, the honest one. And in that, there's a strange kind of hope, not the childish kind that waits for things to get better. The older kind, the one that understands life is not about being restored. It's about refusing to be erased. That hope sits quietly. It doesn't scream. It watches you pick up the pieces they said were useless and hold them as proof that your story didn't start with them, but it will continue without their permission. People ask me now, "Are you proud of him?" That word doesn't fit. I'm grateful, because he did what I couldn't. He remembered what I tried to forget. He looked at the things we almost lost and said, "This matters, even if no one else sees it." And in that moment I realized we hadn't failed completely. We'd left just enough behind for someone to find. That's all it takes. One person refusing to forget. You don't need everyone to understand. You just need one person who won't let the story die in the trash. And that person, that's who becomes the real beginning. The final chapter is almost silent, but it will say the one thing we all wait our whole lives to hear. And not all of us live long enough to say it. I've said everything I needed to say, but not everything I've kept. There's a difference between telling the truth and being done with silence. Telling the truth still leaves room for hope. Ending the silence means there's nothing left to wait for. No apology coming, no moment of closure, no last scene to make sense of everything. It means you've accepted that some things happened, and they won't be fixed. And yet, here I am, still speaking, because even in this late hour of life, there's one thing I haven't fully given voice to, not because it was too painful, but because it felt too small, too private, too ordinary. But that's the lie. It's never the big things that shape us. It's the decisions no one saw, the words we didn't say out loud, the way we treated ourselves when no one else was watching. Let me say this plainly before the light goes out. I spent most of my life not knowing how to take care of myself without asking someone else's permission. Not physically, not financially, emotionally. I asked the world to tell me I mattered. I asked my father through obedience. I asked my students through excellence. I asked my wife through loyalty. I asked my daughter by showing up every single time she needed me, even when I had nothing left to give. And I kept asking, even when the answers stopped coming, even when I realized the people I was trying to prove myself to were gone, or worse, indifferent. There is nothing lonelier than realizing you've shaped your entire life around the hope that one day someone would finally say, "You were enough all along." But they won't, not because you didn't deserve it, because they didn't know how to say it. because they were waiting for the same words from someone else. That's how it happens. Generations of people starving for the same sentence, too afraid to speak it, too wounded to give it. So we pass down silence like it's wisdom and call it tradition. I'm not angry anymore, but I am tired of that kind of inheritance. There's something no one tells you about aging. Eventually, the need to be understood gets replaced by the need to understand yourself. And what I understand now is this: I didn't need their approval. I needed my own protection. I needed to stop letting people decide what parts of me were acceptable. I needed to stop handing over the keys to my own worth. But I didn't know that then, so I became whatever they applauded: reliable, strong, grateful, quiet, and in return they called me good. But good is not a life, it's a mask. The real life, the one I only started to touch in the last few years, began when I finally said no. No to being the peacekeeper, no to being the secret keeper, no to staying small just to make others comfortable. And yes, I lost people, ones I thought I'd have forever. But the strange thing is, I didn't miss them, because I finally realized they never really saw me. They saw the version I offered, the version that never made demands, the one that always smiled first. My grandson didn't become the man he is by accident. He became that man because someone finally handed him back the parts of his story others threw away. And because of that, he started his life not with a mask, but with a spine. That's what legacy is, not a name, not a medal, not a prayer book. It's whether the next one in line has to repeat your silence or gets to break it. And he broke it. I wish I could say I'm proud, but proud feels too small. What I feel is peace, not because everything is resolved. It's not. There are still gaps in the story, still questions that won't be answered, still people who left without explaining why. But peace doesn't require perfection. It only requires the decision to stop abandoning yourself. So, I'll leave you with this, the sentence I waited my whole life to hear. You were never too much. You were never too late. And you were never supposed to earn love by disappearing. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to remember who you were before they taught you to be afraid of your own voice. That's what I would have told myself at 17. That's what I would have told my daughter the first time she apologized for crying. That's what I would have told my grandson, even if he never became mayor, even if he never named those 6 things, because none of those titles matter. The only thing that matters is this: he saw himself, not as someone created by others, but as someone who could choose what to keep and what to leave behind. I won't speak much after this. There's nothing left to say. The boy has the compass, and now he knows how to use it. Let the world ask him what direction he'll take. I already know the answer. He's going forward without forgetting where he started. And that, finally, is enough.